Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And I am so appreciative that you're here. Thank you so much for tuning in. You're going to love the show. I can guarantee it. I have an amazing guest with me today. Her name is Megan Walsh. She is a creative arts psychotherapist who earned her master's degree in music psychotherapy from New York University in 2014. She worked as a licensed creative arts therapist and board-certified music therapist in a variety of prominent teaching hospitals before opening her own private practice in 2019. When Megan isn't seeing clients, she loves harmonizing to her Spotify playlist, listening to her favorite podcasts, spending quality time outdoors with her husband, son, and 2 pups. Megan, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It is such a treat to meet you. I love your photographs. I've seen, several of
Thank
your
you.
shots. They're just absolutely,
Oh,
they're so expressive. They say it all.
oh, thank you. I so appreciate that. We had a lot of fun
I'll
doing
bet
those.
it looked like you did.
Mhm.
So tell it, how in the world, pardon me, did you get interested
Yeah.
in creative art therapy? Because I
Mhm.
have never heard of it as a specific area of psychotherapy, but
Yeah.
interestingly enough, in all of the people that I talk to, with the podcast, I hear a
Mhm.
lot of them who have never painted before are now painting and
Mhm.
it changed their
Yeah,
lives,
totally.
and dancing, music, all of those things that to me really feed the soul.
Yeah. Oh, so true. That is a great way to put it, feeding the soul.
Mm.
Yeah, well, I grew up, the youngest of 3 kids, 2 older brothers, and I was your kind of um, classic girl who loved to dance and sing and, act and do all of that. So I was very invested in those activities. And singing was always my go-to. I loved music. It was everything to me. And, as I got older, it became the place where I could just really use my voice. I
Mm.
grew up in a family where we didn't talk about, what was really going on. We didn't talk about emotions or feelings. Music and singing became the place where I got to express myself that way. So it was so important. I loved it so much. And I knew that I wanted to go on to study music. I really wanted it to be a part of my career. And I initially went to school. I went to New York University for undergrad as well. I
Mm.
initially went there for music education.
Mhm.
And I'll side note that I come from a very helping profession family, from the southwest side of Chicago. My
Mm.
mom's a nurse. My dad is a firefighter. Both my brothers are firefighters now. So very that kind of work is in our blood. And so I think I wanted to find my own way to do that,
Mm.
through music. So teaching felt like the right way to start. But then I kind of slowly realized after, starting school that, I didn't really want to teach. I loved my psychology classes. Like I was finding that so fascinating. So
Mhm.
I went ahead and created my own major as an undergrad and just really combined psychology and music. And luckily, they offered an intro to music therapy class that I took, I think, my sophomore year. And I remember I called my mom right after the first class and was like, "Oh, this is it. This is what I want to do." And so I went straight to the master's program after I graduated, and kind of the rest is history there. That was a 2-year program, graduated, and I worked, in a children's hospital in New York for about 5 years, before transitioning when we moved back to Chicago. Worked at a children's hospital here for a year before going into private practice full time.
Interesting. I worked in a children's hospital in Arkansas. I lived there
No
for 19
way.
months, 1 day and 15 hours. So I worked at a children's hospital there. It was a great hospital, very state of the
Uh-huh.
art. And I did
Yeah.
a little bit of work at the children's hospital here in Denver and
Oh,
actually
wow.
had students. I was a respiratory therapist before I was a PT.
Wow. Oh,
So yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
loved
So
working
cool.
with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Such powerful work there.
Mhm.
And especially so powerful to see how music can really, support, especially a child who's kind of taken out of their day-to-day life, right? Their environment, their social circles, and right, that's so abnormal for them to be in the hospital setting. So to bring, music and music making experiences to them and with them to help kind of normalize the environment, make it less scary, help them to process any emotions that are coming up around being there, was such a powerful experience.
And now you just actually triggered a memory for me, and this is going back 30 years. I was working in one of the units at the Children's Hospital in Arkansas, and of course, they always had the radio on.
Uh-huh.
And there was this darling little boy that I was working with. He was 2 years old, curly, light brown hair, and he had a trach tube in. So, he
Mm-hmm.
couldn't talk.
Yeah.
And this song came over on the radio. I don't know if you ever heard it, the Don't Worry, Be Happy.
Yeah. Oh
And then
yeah.
it has all those do-do-do-do-do-do's in the song. Yeah, and he was so funny because I looked at him and he was just doing the do with his mouth. So he was kind of
Oh,
like
yeah.
singing to it and didn't have a care in the world. It was such a wonderful, it just
Yeah.
warmed my heart to see that.
It's the best, right? So many
Mhm,
experiences like that where maybe they can't verbalize, can't do a certain
mhm.
amount of things, but when we bring music in, right, you can just be, right? You can just, enjoy it, absorb it, play along to it in whatever way you can. And it's such a nice bonding experiences, both for, patients and their families, but also
Oh yeah.
patients and staff. That was, one of the most lighthearted, fun parts was having, right, the nurses, the PTs,
Mhm.
OTs, respiratory all join, whenever we were making music
So
in the
then I'm
rooms.
really curious, was that a new thing? Because it sounds like it might be a relatively new field. So if you're in
Sure.
this hospital setting, that the staff members probably had not ever experienced that before. So it was something new for them.
I think newer. Yeah. I don't
Mhm,
know when like when this became most prominent.
mhm,
I know that New York itself has kind of been like kind of where a lot of the creative arts therapies kind
mhm,
of grew and blossomed. I know that the creative arts therapies themselves, and I can speak for music therapy specifically, actually kind of
mhm,
came out of World War II, where they would have musicians kind of volunteer to come in to work with veterans
mhm,
after the war. And I think they found that, oh wow, this is really powerful and effective
mhm.
for them to help in managing the emotions and emotional physical pieces that came afterwards. And then it kind of gradually built from there.
Yeah.
So definitely has become more widely known, and I would say now it's definitely more mainstreamed in like your major hospitals, at least
Mhm.
children's hospitals, of having a music therapist and art therapist usually as part of the psychosocial team.
Well, it really makes sense too that it would be more or less coming out of New York because you look at New York, it's just, the mecca of arts and
Hmm.
dance and music.
So
And
true.
so it makes perfect
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then after you did how many years working in the hospital setting?
So about 6 years in the hospital setting.
What
And
made you
then
decide to go out on your own?
great question.
Mhm,
So, I worked with my own music psychotherapist since I was 19. And I always was like, I want to do what he does. Like
mm,
this, he
mhm,
went through the same grad program that I did, and it just never felt like possible. Then
mhm,
the pandemic hit. And so I was working in the hospital actually, still as
mhm,
that started. I had started to explore like gradually having my own clients on the side up until
mhm,
then.
mhm,
But then once the pandemic hit and my hours kind of shifted drastically, I had a
mhm,
few weekdays that were open. So then I decided, I reached out actually to a practice in Chicago, a creative arts therapy practice, and I
mhm,
joined them and kind of used those days to start to see clients. And then shortly thereafter decided, okay, I'm really going to commit to developing my own practice in
mhm,
this way and really focusing on teens and adults
mhm.
and developing this. And because I was licensed in New York, I could virtually see New York clients, which upon leaving New York, I wouldn't have thought would have been an option.
Right.
But the pandemic kind of did create that option to have a fully virtual private practice.
Mhm,
So I just kind of took that and kind of ran with it. And then there came a point where, I had enough of a client base that I could transition out of the hospital setting. And,
mhm,
after having worked there for about, or in that setting for about 6 years, it felt right. It felt right to kind of work to really establish my own practice, especially as I was preparing to, to start my own family and
Mhm.
wanting to have more flexibility, that working in the hospital setting just didn't allow.
Was it scary going out on your own?
Oh, terrifying.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's why I had to do it like little by little. Like I couldn't
Mhm.
like make the full jump myself. I kind of had to have the hospital job while I was, starting to
Mhm.
explore and open up. And then as I had part of a group practice, part my own
Mhm.
practice, and did that for about a
Mhm.
bit, and then eventually to the point where it felt safe enough to fully, be on my own 2 feet. And now, I'm so grateful that I went through that. I wouldn't have it any other way. But it's right. It's running your own business is scary. It's
It's
a
not
scary
for the
thing.
weak-hearted, that's for sure.
No.
I graduated with my master's degree in physical therapy in 1996, so my second
Uh-huh.
career. And in 1999, 3 years later, it was like, I'm done with this. And I just went full force. I didn't even give it much thought. It's like, I'm going out on my own.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible.
Well,
Just
yeah,
made that jump.
I made the jump. I probably should have prepared a little bit more for it, but it worked out and I was a lot
Yeah.
happier.
Yeah.
And I was able to
Absolutely.
help people the way I wanted to help them,
Mm-hmm.
not
Oh,
within the constraints. And I'm sure that you've
yeah.
probably experienced this
Oof.
too, in the
Hmm.
hospital setting, the constraints
Totally.
of the insurance and, the amount of
Yep.
time you're allowed to spend with the patients.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
very restrictive.
Yeah, the systems, the expectations. And I find I supervise other therapists too, and other music therapists who are in these settings. And there's so much that gets triggered in us in these kind of systems, right? Where we are
Mhm,
being told what to do, how to do it, right? Our individual freedoms, tend to be taken a bit because we have to
mhm.
follow what they're saying, and we don't always feel like we're treated fairly. And it just tends to bring up a lot of issues that if we have a history of issues with authority, which many of us do. Of
Of
course,
course.
I would say all of us do.
Right.
And so I find that sometimes then it takes you away from why you're there in the first place,
Mhm,
the work. Because if you're so stressed over your boss, right, dictating this or that, then
mhm,
you really lose focus on the work itself. And that happened to me plenty of times, in the hospital setting. And so now the fact that I can just be so present and focused with my
mhm,
clients, and then be away from it, right? Once the session is
mhm,
over, and be able to transition to,
mhm,
hanging out with my son, or taking the dogs for a walk. It's
mhm.
just the best.
Mhm. And what you were describing in the hospital setting, I'm having like mild flashbacks.
Yeah.
It's it's very the word I would use, I think, would be very oppressive.
Mhm.
And it's not
Yeah.
only oppressive to the staff, to the therapists, but it's
Mhm.
oppressive to the patients because
Sure.
as knowing that I could do so much more and you could give so much more and not being
Mhm.
permitted to do that,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
nobody's really winning there.
Mm-mm. No, it's so tough.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful work, right? It is beautiful work that gets done there, but it makes sense as to why people's, time spent working in those settings tends to be limited.
Mhm, mhm.
That
Some
it's kind
people
of
really yeah, some people don't have the choice to go out on their
right.
own or they
Sure.
don't have the
Totally.
courage or and I can understand that
Yeah.
because
Oh,
it is really
it's hard.
scary.
It is. It's really,
Mhm,
really scary. And a lot of factors have to be in place, right? Like
mhm,
I know I'm lucky that, my husband has, health insurance through his company. So that made that jump a lot easier because I didn't
mhm,
have to worry about that. Because
mhm,
I could just hop onto his. And I know many friends and colleagues who didn't have that option and made this jump took a lot longer, or, wasn't feasible,
yeah,
until, a much longer time span,
mhm,
to get to that point. So I'm very grateful for that
yeah.
too.
When I did it, I was under my husband's health insurance too, so yeah,
Yeah,
full disclosure
totally.
there. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, so now, tell us what it's the difference. I mean, you and I talked a little
sure.
bit before the recording,
Yeah.
but we talked a little bit about talk therapy
Mhm.
and, why something like creative arts therapy,
Mhm.
why it's different,
Yeah.
how it's effective, how it's, you can get geeky with, the nerve patterns, neuroplasticity,
Sure. Yeah.
anything you want to do with that, because I would really love to understand a little bit more how it works. And I'm sure the audience would love
Totally.
that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in talk therapy, you're obviously talking about your past, right? Your traumas, your anxiety, depression, all these things that may, if we're staying in talk land, right, may just stay in kind of like an intellectualized brain type of place. And it's, it's why methods like cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Let's change your thoughts. So then we change your behaviors and we change your emotions. Sure. Right. It is effective. It does work. However, when we have and we experience certain traumas or just even an overwhelming set of emotions, that doesn't just get processed in our brains, it gets processed in our bodies. And so often, right, where talk therapy misses the boat is that it leaves the body out completely, right? It just stays and like this all is in your thoughts, in your mind, when no, actually it is, right? It's processed in our full, the whole mind body connection. And what is so great about, and I'll use music therapy as an example, is that if we get to a point where, right, maybe I'm feeling flooded or overwhelmed or kind of in a freeze in talking about a certain topic that actually is really traumatic and hard to discuss because at the time it was traumatic, and I didn't have words to process what was happening at the time. The fact that we could just make some music together and then we can talk about what was that music like, right? Let's project what the emotions were onto the music. And, for myself, I always like to use the example of, with my own music psychotherapist, finally being able to process the emotion of anger, right? I grew up never, right? Like classic people pleaser, would never be able to be angry. Like I couldn't do that. And so finally, when I like had a drum and I kind of was able to just like let it out and my therapist matched me there, it like, it unlocked something that was super stuck. And, I didn't have access to it. And when you don't have access to anger, right, it's going to affect your body in all these ways. For me, it was a lot more anxiety, right? Feeling really ungrounded, feeling queasy, right? All of our emotions manifest in our bodies in this way. And so to be able to bring music and bring creativity in, it allows us to kind of go to these spaces that, right, that we miss if we're just talking about it. We have to feel our way through it. And right, music allows us to feel on so many levels, bringing in art, drama, movement, breath, like all of these things help just connect us to our bodies, which I know, is so incredibly important in moving through really intense emotional material.
I love the drumming part because even just watching you, and of course, if the listeners are watching this on YouTube, they could see your movement, but you were actually physically demonstrating how you would beat that drum. And to me, as a martial artist, really understand that sense of hitting something that feels so good. Of course, I hit people and get away with it. And I just love that. I mean, it's just incredible. But I did something called body-centered therapy for a while. And I was told, oh, it would be so good for me because it's body-centered. So I'm a mover. I like to be able to move, and I hate being static, especially if I'm told I have to sit still for a while. Ooh, that just doesn't work for me. And so, okay, this body-centered therapy probably sounded, like it would work. Well, I had no idea why they called it body-centered therapy because I just sat there and it was basically talk therapy.
Talk therapy. Yeah.
Until finally it was like, okay, this isn't working for me.
Yeah, this isn't for me.
It made it worse, made the trauma worse.
Sure.
But moving and, dancing and singing. And I love the fact that, you found your voice and learned how to use it through song.
Totally.
And that's just so powerful.
It
and
is.
I also like the fact that you brought up the queasiness. The physical symptoms that you feel, because we've all been told ever since we could remember that stress, is bad for our health. Stress kills, heart attacks, but you don't really understand that in an embodied way until you experience it. And when I was going through, my rough time, I mean, my hair was starting to fall out. And that's when I had a real wake-up call. It's like, if this is what's happening on the outside of my body and my skin looked terrible, what's happening on the inside that I can't see?
Totally. Yeah. And it's all there, right? It's all being affected. All of our cells are responding, right, to these emotions, because especially the way we breathe, right? If we're not breathing into our diaphragm, right? We're not getting the air that and the flow that our whole bodies need. to feel right at ease,
Mhm.
and to feel grounded. And that is when we're at ease and grounded is when we're feeling more content, right? We tend to feel more joyful, more open-minded. And so it's so important to allow ourselves to use the container of, let's say, music or movement,
Mhm.
right? As safe containers for us to release all of these pent up emotions that are causing distress to our
Mhm.
organs.
And I love
Absolutely.
the way you mentioned the ease. So the ease in the
Hmm.
body and, the ease in our entire life once you can get to
Hmm.
that point. And the
Yeah.
opposite of that is
Yeah.
dis-ease,
Disease.
right?
Hmm.
Which causes
Exactly. Disease. There we
disease.
go. Yep.
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's so important, and it's so cool to music that it accesses our subconscious, right? The things that we don't have in our conscious mind. And I like to use myself as an example that when I first went to my own therapy at 19, I went in being like, there's nothing really, I'm just here to like try out what it would be like to go to a music therapist. I'm fine.
Mhm.
And what so shocked me was, whoa, okay, right? My life and my world as I've experienced it
Mhm.
isn't ordinary, right? Like actually, there was a lot of things here that were abnormal. And to be able
Mhm.
to see that, and especially even see in my own songwriting, like I would write songs a lot in my teen years. And I
Mhm.
would write about what I thought were like, I just made this up, right? This is
Mhm.
this is nothing that's real. And then to go back and to read so many themes of, right, like abandonment, like, oh, you left me and I'm so sad. And right when
Mhm.
I didn't have an emotion, like a relationship experience, a
Mhm.
romantic relationship experience at that point to
Mhm.
have elicited this song. But of course, right, this was hitting at like my most, deepest abandonment pieces, that so many
Mhm.
of us have.
Mhm.
But that's where it was coming from. But I didn't even have the conscious awareness of it until I could bring that into my own, right, my own therapy practice and be able to see like, wow, okay,
Mhm.
there it is. And
So how old were you when you wrote your first song?
oh, I actually won an award in like kindergarten for writing a song. So technically we'll say 5. But
Oh
when
my
I
goodness.
when I did it in more of a more mature way, I was probably 18 actually.
Mhm.
That was when I
Wow.
started to learn at least how to accompany myself with a guitar. So
Mhm. So
yeah.
did you set out to write the song and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a song. Or did it just kind of happen organically that you were sitting down, you were playing the piano or the guitar, and
Yeah.
that's when the idea came forth?
At the time, I was intentionally writing songs and
Hmm.
I would always write the lyrics first. And
Hmm.
so, I think I remember I would like, I remember I would like, I would write a song like, oh, this is what I'd want a love song to look like. So I would
Hmm.
write that. And
Hmm.
then I think the other ones would be more of like, I would try to access like, this one feels more like longing, and then just kind of went with what came to me
Hmm.
there. And now, yeah, looking back, especially on many many different songs, it's so
Hmm.
interesting and funny to see, and sad. I hold such sadness for that version of me, right,
Hmm.
who didn't know, right, what was
Hmm.
happening or where this was really coming from, but she just knew that it had to come out.
Hmm. Wow. Okay,
So
now let's talk about the creative arts, because I'm talking about, are you talking about painting,
mhm.
you know, drawing, that type of
Yeah,
thing?
totally. So I guess I can differentiate a few things. So I'm a board certified music therapist. So my training is primarily focused on music therapy.
Hmm.
In New York State, I'm a licensed creative arts therapist. So art
Hmm.
therapist, drama, dance movement, and
Okay.
music therapist. We have our own individual credentials, certifications,
Hmm.
but then we all hold the same licensure.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of logistical difference. But I would say, like, I like to refer to myself as a creative arts psychotherapist because I'm
Mhm.
not only using music in my sessions.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
find that, each modality has a different level of distance to it.
Mhm. Mhm.
That, for someone who's really maybe not ready yet to go deep in an embodied way into their trauma or into those pieces, I'm going to go to like art or writing
Mhm.
first
Mhm.
because, right, like they can have control over the pen, the paper, right? They don't have to access it in their body yet. We're just putting it on paper. It feels safer that way.
Mhm.
So I may start that way with someone just to kind of ease them in if they're not already a creative person
Mhm.
who's using creativity in their daily life.
Mhm.
Um, and then music can also have more distance if we're just listening, right? I'll ask someone typically early on, like, what song are you feeling connected to
Mhm.
today? And so often, someone like me who may have like a really bubbly, outgoing exterior will bring in like a really intense song
Mhm.
that, right, gives me a lot of insight into, okay, they're feeling
Mhm.
connected to this. There's something underneath, right? That
Mhm.
either isn't conscious or they're just not ready to share yet, but it gives me a lot of information about where they
Mhm.
are. And then with drama, like adding in drama therapy, they do a lot of work with roles. And so I love to kind of offer the opportunity for someone to kind of list out, what roles do you play in your life, right? Like, I'm a
Mhm.
daughter, a wife, a mother, this, that, right? And to be able to take a look at those roles, which are your dominant roles, which roles might not have as much stage time, but maybe you want them to.
Mhm.
It's kind of a way to play around a bit with all the parts of self.
Mhm.
And I know parts work is kind of a buzzword in the therapy community, but it's really helpful to kind of tease out these different areas within
Mhm.
us that are either we need to give more time and space towards, or maybe we want to renegotiate how we are
Mhm.
being these parts in our lives. And then, of course, with movement and body, that's
Mhm.
for, right, when someone is ready, really ready to be more embodied and connected. That's when I'm going to move towards breath or even movement, right? If there is,
Mhm.
I think I like to bring in movements a lot to kind of mirror or respond to something a client is bringing. Like,
Mhm.
if they're feeling like avoidant or resistant towards something, I'll use like this kind of image or something that shows like, hey, is it feeling like this? Right?
Mhm.
Like, stay away. Or, right, I
Mhm.
may make some sort of pose to kind of try and mirror what they're feeling,
Mhm.
and they can tell me yes or no. Or I may ask them if do they have a pose of what this feeling
Mhm.
looks like, just another way to externalize it and bring
Mhm.
it into like the play space.
Mhm. Okay, so many things I love about that, what you were just talking about. I love the fact that you use the word stage time,
Yeah.
that phrase. That's, the whole world is a stage, basically. But
Yes.
yeah,
Oh
and
yeah.
we wear so many different hats, and we're on so
Mhm.
many different platforms in our lives. And especially these days, it seems like we're juggling so many things at one time.
Oh yeah.
And then another thing was the stark difference between what we were talking about previously of working in the hospital setting and
Hmm.
working, on your own, and the way that you can customize how you approach your clients.
Hmm.
And just to
Yeah.
emphasize the fact that we're all so different. I mean, we all have the
Hmm.
same basic needs in life, but we all
Yeah.
have, you know, different issues, and not
Totally.
one specific thing is not going to work for every single person.
Hmm. Oh yeah. It's so true. So
And
it's
yeah,
to
to be
be
able to
able to
honor
have a
that.
toolkit, yeah, of
Right,
things that
right.
may help and
Yeah.
support. It's precisely why talk therapy, right, doesn't work for every single
Mhm.
person,
Mhm.
because their needs, likely will go beyond that.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I do know somebody who has been going to the same therapist for 30 years.
Hmm.
And the therapist was getting ready to retire, but still kept this person on as a
Yeah.
client. And it's like,
Mm.
wait a minute, what's happening here? Shouldn't
Yeah.
something have changed in 30 years, maybe? And
Sure.
couldn't maybe one of you or both of you realize that maybe something needed to change? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, and that we could talk a long time about what the relationship, right? The therapist client relationship means, because really, like, actually the greatest indicator of someone's growth and development in therapy is the relationship with the therapist.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
if and I think it's why bringing in all of these elements as a therapist tends to offer clients a lot of comfort and trust, because they know, okay, right, that I can kind of be however I am in this dynamic, and my needs will be met, right? That I can trust that there's going to be space for me to process whatever's coming up in a really safe way. Because, and I always invite my clients to say, like, what's not working, right? How can I get this better? Right. What do you need more of? Just as a way, because especially, right, if we're in like a traditional talk therapy setting and like internally we're like, oh, this sucks, I hate this, I don't, right? We're not going to be open, right, to the growth and change that we want to happen, and right, would be why we might move on. And I've had my own experience, prior to seeing my own therapist that I've been with for a long time, that of like just people where I'm like, the vibe isn't right, like it's got to be a good fit. So
yeah, and talk therapy, you're there in the therapist's office doing it. With what you're doing, you're actually giving your clients the tools. I mean, they could put on music anytime.
Oh, for sure.
And
Absolutely.
if they're comfortable with moving, either to music or just moving organically, I mean, that's something it's portable.
Oh,
And then they can do that
absolutely.
on their own.
Yeah. So helpful.
So now, do you work with clients like just purely online, or do you actually work with them in person now too? I mean, I know COVID has changed so much for everybody, and some of it is actually in a good way that, you can work with people online, and make it more convenient.
Right, more accessible. Yeah, so I'm a fully virtual practice. I am only seeing clients online. I would say probably 75% of my clients are on the East Coast, and I'm located in Chicago. And I mean, down the line, I would ideally love to have an in-person setting, because with, making music and creativity, it is so special to be in the room together doing this kind of work. There's so many times I've wished, like, oh, I only wish, I wish we could be together doing this. So I think down the line, that is a goal of mine. But for the time being, it really works well virtually.
How old's your son?
He's 8 months old.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So this is really perfect for you.
Oh yeah. Yes. Very, very much so. So I think for the, foreseeable future, we're going to be in this setup for a while, at least until he, goes off to school. So
wow,
yeah,
that's awesome. Well, how could people get a hold of you if they want? I mean, okay, so you're specifically working with people in New York and Chicago. Are you licensed? I mean, to work with people in other states, do you have to become licensed in those states?
Sure. Great question. So I am licensed in New York and Rhode Island. Actually, Rhode Island has a music therapy licensure. And this is actually one great thing about the creative arts therapies, is that many states are now catching up and having licensures in the same way that someone that went to grad school for social work or counseling, right? We all got the same, education to be therapists. It's just, I think the creative arts piece was kind of slow to follow in terms of getting the same state licensures. So Illinois actually just passed theirs late last year. So that is that it's getting solidified now. So anywhere that doesn't have a creative arts therapy or music therapy licensure, I can technically work as a board certified music therapist, but I tend to kind of stick to the areas where I am licensed, just to kind of keep it easy and clear until all the licensures follow up. But technically, if there is no licensure, I can see someone as a music therapist.
Okay, good to know. Well, gosh, there was something else I was thinking, and then it just went away.
Oh, good.
I love when that happens.
You had asked me about where to find me.
Right.
I know people can, my website is resonatepsychotherapy.com. And Instagram, I'm at Connect with Megan.
And you're on LinkedIn as well, aren't you?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
I am there.
Okay. 'Cause I did find you there. So
there we go. I'm there too.
So you must be.
Yes.
So is there a way for people to reach you through your website if they want to either just connect with you, ask you questions? Do you do like consultations or?
Yeah, absolutely. I can do consultations. There's an easy way to kind of schedule a call with me on my website. Can absolutely do consultations. yeah, and to talk through what anyone's needs are. We'd be happy to chat and to connect and to see how it can be of help.
So do you have any like final pearls of wisdom that you want to leave with the audience before we wrap things up?
Yeah, you know what? That is a um yeah, that's a great question. There's so many things actually I would want to
And it does not
to
have to
bring.
be just one thing. Okay. We've got the
Sure.
time. You can just,
Totally. Yeah. Let's see. Um, you know what I love to ask people? I love to ask them to think about their creative self and how is your creative self when you were younger? What did you enjoy? Right? What creative aspects did you lean towards? And I love to ask people to connect with that because so often, I think, especially if we don't follow a path of being quote unquote good at music or good at art or a good
Mhm.
actor or a good dancer, right? Then all of a sudden you're out, like you're out of the
Mhm.
game. Because, right, if no one told me that I was good at this, then we're likely not going to engage in it anymore,
Mhm.
which happens to so many people. And that's something I
Mhm.
always have to say is that you don't have to be a musician or a singer or an artist
Mhm.
to do this kind of work, to be part of it, because we all have creative selves. And I
Mhm.
think just to get in touch with that and understand your journey creatively,
Mhm.
and then thinking about today, right? How do you serve yourself or how do you lean in creatively? Do you like to listen to music? What kind of music? Do you like to, right, just draw, paint for fun? Do you like to see movies? Just kind of
Mhm.
checking in with how are you being creative? What do you enjoy? Are there things you enjoy but you're not allowing yourself to do? Kind of
Mhm.
looking at that. I think it's just interesting to think about our creative
Mhm.
selves in that way.
I personally think that that part of us gets sucked out of us after
Hmm.
we even, start school. I mean, we're kids
Yeah.
and very young and we're so creative in every way. And then we
Hmm.
get to school and then we have the restrictions, the constraints, that this is the right
Yeah.
way, this is the wrong way. And
Hmm.
then that we start to lose that sense of playfulness and creativity. And then we
Yeah.
get into adulthood and it further gets sucked out of us. And to return
Hmm.
to that sense of playfulness is just so powerful.
Yeah. Oh, it's incredible. It's the best. And so much of that is like, right, we access it's our inner
Mhm,
child, right?
mhm,
Allowing ourselves to bring that back out is really healing in so many
mhm,
ways because our inner child is our most authentic self that all of a
mhm,
sudden learns that, okay, I have to put on this mask and act this way,
mhm,
right? It's when we unleash that, oof, it's so powerful and healing. And really kind of the core of the work that I do is making a
mhm.
safe space for all of our inner children to be creative and playful. So really, really powerful in that
I've
way.
heard so many amazing ways that some of my guests have found their creative self or their inner child or whatever. And one of
Mhm.
them actually said she just goes out and plays in the mud. And
Oh,
she
I
says, I
love
don't
that.
care. She's a grown woman, went outside one day when she's going through all
Yes.
this emotional crap and just
Uh-huh.
decided, sat down in the mud and started playing it and
Yeah.
started digging.
Oh,
And she just loves it. And
oh,
could you
yeah.
imagine?
Yeah,
The
that actually
feel of it, the
that's
tactile sense.
mhm. Oh, so how freeing and just oh, so fun. I love that.
Mhm, mhm.
I love that so much.
Yeah. And I like I said, this tactile sense, but with the type of work that you do, it is
Mhm.
awakening so many senses that we really don't connect with.
Yeah, yeah. And how they're so important, right, as part of
Mhm,
our well-being. And
mhm,
it's something I even have to remind myself, right, when I'm in the midst of, a
mhm,
crying baby and feeling so stressed, all of this, like I have to remind myself too. Whew, okay, let's take some breaths. Let's center,
mhm,
right? What does my body need right now?
mhm,
And really just checking in on how I need to move or if I need to sing or play or just write or even just sit and be.
mhm,
But just
mhm,
really tuning back in
mhm.
that way.
Excellent. Well,
Mhm.
Megan, it has been fantastic having you on the show.
Yay.
I love listening to you. I love the work that you're doing. I
Oh,
think it's just
thank you.
absolutely amazing. As a longtime dancer, movement is just,
Yeah.
if you can't move, you can't live.
Oh, so true. Oh, great quote. Yes,
Yeah, you
absolutely.
can borrow that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
Actually,
it.
I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner. I don't know if you're familiar with that,
Oh,
but
no.
the gentleman who created this method, his name was Moshe Feldenkrais, and
Uh-huh,
his one famous quote, it weighs many of them, but one of them,
uh-huh.
my favorite one is movement is life.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Mhm,
It's everything.
and so is
So
music.
powerful. Yes, absolutely. They go hand in hand.
Mhm.
That's for
Well, thanks
sure.
again for being on the show. You're
Thank you for
fantastic.
having me. Oh, thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Okay, awesome. That's what I like to hear. Everybody,
Yeah.
thank you so much for listening, and do share this episode with everyone you know. Give us a 5-star review. Check out Megan's website. Oh my gosh, you have to look at this thing. It's just absolutely fantastic. And some of her pictures are just wonderful.
Oh,
Connect with
thank
her on
you.
LinkedIn. If you have any questions, do contact her, because as you could tell, she is a very warm, kind-hearted, and loving person, as well as a very creative one as well. And do remember to find your creative self and
Mhm.
kind of connect with that inner child. I
Yeah.
know that sounds a little, sounds a
Yeah,
little,
sure, a
yeah,
little woo-woo but
yeah,
it's there whether you like it or not, right?
yeah. And it can be really fun. You might even want to
Yeah.
get down in the dirt and dig in the mud.
Yes, absolutely. I love it.
And that is the way of the FemiNinja.